Thanks for joining Sales with Suli, a mom of three who spent the last 12 summers knocking doors. Welcome to my podcast, where I talk about all things women, the ups and downs of my journey, and what it takes to find success on and off the doors. Enjoy this episode. Hey ladies, welcome back. Today I kind of wanted to talk about a topic that I feel like a lot of us don't really address. And as I was listening to a couple of podcasts, shout out to No Soliciting Bruh. I was listening to one of his podcasts where I can't even remember her name now. Audrey, Abby, anyways. And in this specific episode, they talk about being authentic and how a lot of times in this industry, we are talking and showing like our successes. And I feel like that a lot of the things that I've done on and off the doors, people can like physically see. And they're so stoked about like my numbers, my stats, and everything that I'm doing to essentially, be able to pave a way. But what I want to talk about is each year, some of the big struggles that I truly had that a lot of people know nothing about. A lot of the things that I was battling with internally, but surprisingly enough, was still able to, quote unquote, find success during that specific summer. So 2009 was my first summer out knocking doors in Seattle. And I know in one of my previous podcasts or episodes, I talk about how I basically shared a story from each year, and they were kind of like happy stories. But this is more of a vulnerable, more authentic in the sense of like, I do want to talk about a lot of the things that I had to overcome internally and personally to be able to find the success of where I'm at currently right now in my life. But 2009 was my first summer in Seattle. And as I'm on a team currently this year with, I think there's 9 of us women on the team, I think back a lot to my first summer in Seattle. There was 8 of us girls in the apartment, and so many guys on the team. I felt like every single girl was just like fighting for the attention of our team leaders or of anyone on the team to be able to hang out with or whatnot after the doors. But it was a big struggle for me to be on a team with 8 girls who didn't have the work ethic that I felt that I did. And I was definitely an outcast. To this woman, I was definitely considered a witch with a B. And it was one of those times where I was just like, I didn't have anyone there for me. I had this pact, but it was just everyone kind of for themselves. And so although this summer was my very first summer and I did break, the female rookie record for the company that I was working with, I struggled the entire summer of not focusing on what the other girls thought about me on the team. I struggled with what the guys were perceiving me as because they were all, interested in those different girls on the team. But it was one of the hardest summers of my life, having to deal with so many emotions on the team and feeling that I was going to be judged on a regular basis because of how much more I was willing to work and do off the doors. So that was definitely very humbling for me. And I probably used that summer more negatively than I did in a positive way, in the sense of like the next few years after that, I wasn't stoked to be on a team where there was going to be a lot of other women. I was definitely felt like I was pit against other women on other teams and other industries. Like, hey, this girl is at this many accounts. What is it that you're going to do to be able to pass her up? And it just like built a lot of this animosity that I felt towards women during that time of when I first started in this door-to-door industry. It just wasn't very positive during my first summer. And then we go to 2010. So although last year, yes, or the year before, I was one of the top female reps. So in 2010, I ended up doing extremely well as well. I did a little over 375 pest control accounts, but what people didn't see was how many accounts that I had that were canceling. Like that entire week, as I was trying to figure out this new market, I would put so many accounts on the door, on the books, and then the next day, people were just calling in call after call after call after call of saying, oh, they thought about it, they didn't want it. They felt that I was a little pushy, or they just felt like everything wasn't explained properly. And so a lot of people, what they did see at the end of the summer was, wow, Suli serviced 375 accounts, but they didn't see that the emotional toll that I had during that summer with all the cancels and all the failures of customers calling me on a regular basis, like pulling out. So although I had serviced 375 accounts, I probably sold well over 400, but just how much I had to deal with emotionally just with those cancels was super hard during that summer as well. 2011, this was definitely a growing summer. So I was married and we were newlyweds, and my husband was like, hey, I'm gonna come and be a service pro. So not only were we newlyweds, we were running a team. I had one of my cousins there, and so I felt the pressure to just help him and make sure that he was financially okay, and it was super rough. And my husband got to the point, like, he loved servicing homes. Like, he loved just doing his job super well, that I basically took advantage of that and was like, well, now you're only going to be servicing my homes. So my husband would be skipping lunch breaks. I'd be making him work on Sundays, basically having him service accounts like after hours. Like anytime I could get someone to commit and say, hey, I want to get pest control, my husband would be right there to go and service the homes. And then a couple days later, I get this call from my branch manager, and he's like, Suli, we got to talk. And I'm like, what the heck did I do now? And he was like, no, well, we can't have Walter servicing your accounts anymore. And I was like, what? What do you mean he can't service my accounts anymore? And he was like, well, I mean, it's just not fair to people on the team and stuff like that, that you basically have a service pro. And I mean, he's your husband, so he's just going to go out of his way to do whatever it takes to make sure that the account is serviced. And I was super offended. I did take it personally and was like, there is no way that he is not going to be servicing my accounts. I got like super upset, and I was like, if he's not going to be working, if he's not going to be servicing my accounts, then he is not working for this company. And the branch manager at the end of the day was like, Suli, okay, like, come on, he is an employee of the company, not necessarily, your employee. So at the end of the day, he basically answers to us, or to the company. And it was one of the things that was just super frustrating. It was one of the biggest arguments that we had, like being newlyweds, and I'm over here being torn at the simple fact that now he has to go and service for everyone on the team. He can't just go out and do whatever it is that I'm like asking him to do. And I probably like told him at least 3 times that I was going to divorce him that summer. So being a newlywed, like struggling so much about like who he was going to be like answering to, running a team, and then still doing over 300 accounts. And that's essentially what people are seeing off the doors, is just the number of accounts that I service, but they didn't see like how much of a toll that it was pulling on this relationship that I had with my husband that was only like so brand new, to try to like figure out our dynamics, figure out my dynamics as a team leader, figure out my dynamic as a wife, and as a friend to people on the team. It was just super hard. And again, people just see the serviced accounts, but they don't see what it took for me to essentially get there at the end of the day. 2012. Okay, So this summer, I was pregnant with Anarisa, and it was definitely one of the, a lot of us women, we battle with our physical appearance, and that's something that just plays a big role for us. And so being pregnant with Anarisa, I was definitely at my heaviest weight, like whatsoever. And so a lot of people, what they saw and what they perceived is like, oh my gosh, like Suli was pregnant and she went and still serviced 175 accounts in 8 weeks and still did more than some of the guys on their team. What people didn't see was how much I was battling my weight, like how much I was battling the mental trauma of the fact that I needed to go out for walks on a regular basis so that I wasn't just sitting on the couch like gaining weight. It was because of that pushed me to go out and knock until like basically almost giving birth to Anarisa while on the doors. And although, yeah, I do get commended for the simple fact of, having that strong work ethic, a lot of times people just aren't seeing how much I'm actually battling. And that was one of the hardest things for me, was coming from like this cute little body and then like blowing up super big and still going out on the doors like day in, day out, and being so cautious of like how customers were perceiving me on the doors, how I was perceiving myself on the doors. I just never felt like the way that my success was portrayed. 2013, this summer was kind of fun. So this was during the time I was pregnant now with my second son. So 2 summers in a row, pregnant, 2 summers in a row. So I was pregnant with Ty during this time, and I was even more massive than I was with Anarisa. And one of the things that I struggled with during this year was just the cultural appearance. So all of my family is based, a lot of my family is based in Utah. And so what Walter was doing, he was working out of state, and so I was bringing my kids to Utah to be watched by some of my family members as I was going in and out, helping like my brother and getting people prepped for the summer. A lot of things that I was battling during the summer was the simple fact that culturally my marriage looked like it was in the crumbles. It was like, how is it that you can possibly still be married and you are literally gone from your husband and your kids like all the time? So my kids and I were living with one of my aunts in Utah, and she essentially came to me and was like, and I had been like slaying it. This was probably like a month and a half of just slaying it on the doors. Her kids were watching my kids on a regular basis. I was flying back and forth between California and Utah to pick up my kids, go back, finish, come back and forth. And then my aunt was essentially like, we're not gonna let you stay here. And I'm like, what? Like, you guys are not gonna let me stay here? I mean, essentially, we have a house in California, but no one close by to be able to watch my kids. And so if we weren't gonna be able to stay there, one, I wasn't gonna be able to go and finish the summer and actually make this dynamic work. And so I asked her, I was like, why is it that you aren't gonna be letting us stay here? Like, what's the problem with like watching my kids? And essentially it was just like, culturally, how often how often Walter and I are apart during this time frame. They're like, he's gonna go and like find other women to talk to, like you're gonna be attracted to other men, like you're gonna be going and like you guys are not gonna be cultivating and building this relationship or this marriage, and I'm not gonna be a part of it. Like, my aunt was basically like, this is not, like, I am not gonna condone this. And so midsummer, while I had like my brother and his best friend who were out there, and then I'm out here trying to like make sure that my kids are tended to, and now there is no one to watch my kids, like whatsoever, like during this time frame. And we ended up having my kids go and be watched by like their other aunts and uncles. Like, I'm just super grateful for all the family members that I do have who are willing to step up to the plate. And there was no way that I was going to be able to find success on the doors without my kids being taken care of, without like the friends and family that I had to be able to step up, just because of the goals that I wanted to reach. So again, during these summers where I was a mom, and even doing like half summers, and people seeing some of the high numbers that I was like producing, what they weren't seeing was the struggles that it took. You know, for me to still feel like I was a mom, for me to still allow Walter to feel like he's the head of the household and continue at a job and a place and a lifestyle that he enjoyed and loved working at. And 2013 was definitely another trying year for our marriage, for our family, and then just for our dynamics as well. 2014 was basically another summer of doing that as well. Bouncing back and forth with like my kids, my brother, his friends, the teams that I had during that time. It definitely played a toll on my numbers not being where I wanted it to be, essentially. But 2015, this is where I learned why people say we don't work with family members. And so 2015, we were in Orange County, and I was running a team with a guy who had been recruited over from another team. And so during this time, I had talked to my little sister into coming and like doing it. She's just so personable, like so awesome with people, and just so outgoing. I'm like, sis, you're gonna love it. You're gonna do so amazing. And then also we just had my brother there during that time. But what we didn't realize was, okay, one, here I am running a team. My husband just basically walking away from work during that time to take off and just come and watch the kids. And then myself, my brother, and my sister. So my brother and I were super similar in the sense of we're just like super determined, we're go-getters, we can go out there. My sister has that same personality as well. But when we're meshing together in that work dynamics, it kind of stunk in how we were hurting each other's feelings without even knowing. We definitely weren't communicating. Then it was bleeding to myself as a team leader. It was bleeding myself. It was bleeding onto me as like a wife and a team leader, that essentially the dynamics during the summer of 2015 in Orange County, like our team did super well. Like numbers wise, I did 380 accounts or whatever, but what I did lose was time, energy, and relationship with my brother and sisters. We were just like clashing heads during this time, but all that people can see from all across the world are just the numbers, just the stats that are being thrown on the boards, but not necessarily like seeing behind the scenes of what it took for me to get there during that summer. 2016, okay. So this summer was super fun. Not really. This was the first summer that I had ran an entire team, like just flat out by myself. 90% of the team were like 20-year-old little boys, like 19 and 20, who were just like so like gung-ho. And we're talking to them, recruiting them like, dude, I'm gonna be on the doors, I'm gonna be knocking, I'm gonna be doing everything it takes to make like $100,000 this summer. So we have all these guys like show up, and then like come to find out that these guys are just like barely even knocking the doors. Partying it up like all night, and then like me just essentially needing to send like one kid home after another. For those of you who don't know what an MD is, so it's basically a marketing deal. It's basically what someone above you gives, and you basically have that allotted amount to pay your reps and take care of all of housing. And so this was the first year that I was on a marketing deal, and also the very beginning of the time that I was gonna realize just how much money I'm gonna lose as a leader in this industry because of it. So the toll of worrying about like people going home and keeping bad recruits because the company's going to charge you rent, like keeping bad recruits because it was like, oh, they haven't even like, they haven't even paid for housing, or they owed you XYZ. So you allow this negativity to stay on the team because you're so caught up on like your managers, like taking it out from your personal pay. And this was one of the summers where it really did. And so again, although I had a great summer there in Orange County, it was also the beginning of my downfall with just seeing the behind the scenes of how finances actually works in a company, like how much that people are going to be owed or taken away. And it wasn't very fun. It wasn't very exciting during that time. 2017. This was definitely another learning year. And so this was the first summer in my door-to-door career that I hit 400. I serviced 401 accounts. And I also did that in a market where no one likes to go. So I was in Las Vegas. It was super hot, and I'm super overweight during this time. Like, I was literally at my highest, probably like 256 pounds of beautifulness out there, just like sweating day in and day out. And so anyways, in 2017, literally every single person on our team was like of color. It was super fun, but this was like a Polynesian team that we had during this time. And we spent a lot more of time, coming up with activities and having fun. And although this was my first summer of ever hitting 400 or ever hitting 401 accounts, this was also the time that I probably lost every single rep to money. Like by the end of the summer, all 30 of these guys, when they felt that, because of the marketing deal that I talked about with like the one previously, and people just realizing that they felt like they were taken advantage, financially, and I still didn't understand the concepts or the dynamics of how marketing deals actually work. And so when people felt like they weren't paid for what they were worth, it just like made sense that basically our team just crumbled. And so to have my best summer numbers wise of 401, but then to also have those like 30 some odd reps also leave, scatter, and go to different offices was super heartbreaking and super eye-opening for me during these summer months. And I think a lot back to that summer, not necessarily it being the first summer that I hit 401, but how quickly I wish that I had learned the importance of helping people to see and feel and understand their true worth, that it was a lot more than money. Like, I wasn't being paid for my worth, therefore my guys weren't being paid for what they were worth, and they were the ones to see it before me. And here I am still sticking it out day in, day out, just putting my head out and going to work. So that was a fun summer. 2018, okay. I get a lot of people of color who are knocking in other industries, and they'll message me and it's like, oh, you're Black. Like, how are you dealing with it on the doors? Like, when you're in just like those nice and wealthy neighborhoods, like, what are you saying? Like, how are you overcoming like the objections of people asking for your badges or just like kicking you out of neighborhoods? And for me, I have always just told people of color, whoever reached out to me, because I never used that as a crutch. And essentially for me, it was just a mindset thing. Like, there is no, people are going to see my skin color if I'm allowing them to see my skin color, was always basically how I felt like on the doors. And I never allowed it to hinder me. But 2018, I had a team about 24 guys, and we were in the state of New Jersey. And first of all, we get there to New Jersey, this whole new market. Our company has never been there, and our housing isn't even put together. So there is another team across the way. We're working for the same company. They have these beautiful, immaculate apartments. So not only do I have a team where half of us are Black, we're now living in apartments that basically my kids are probably getting high every day just from our neighbors smoking. we we are getting like bamboozled on the doors. Like we are getting like kicked out of neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood because we don't have permits. So our company didn't have permits in the state, and we spent probably weeks, months just basically battling courthouses, battling cops, battling everyone, basically to give us the permission to be able to just knock door to door, like here in this specific state. And so what happened was, like, when you're going into a state where you don't have permitting, especially to one such as New Jersey, where you're gonna pop up on everyone's Facebook page, it becomes draining. It becomes daunting. I spent more time as a team leader in 2018 trying to bail my guys out of cop cars, trying to bail my guys out of like Facebook group pages of being just like slandered all over the place. I probably only had so our summers last about 4 months, and for actually total knocking days was probably only about 8 weeks during this time frame, from having to deal with cops, from having to deal with reps and skin color, from having to deal with not even feeling comfortable in the apartments that we were living in, and then doing the best that I've ever done so far at 452 serviced accounts with a 585 contract value. That part and concept was super fun for sure. But the simple fact of how hard it was to get there and have all those guys of color, because they were just so ingrained and felt like they couldn't come over it, literally leave midsummer and go and knock for another company. So the world saw Suli doing great and doing 452 accounts. But what people didn't see was the loss of reps, the loss of time, the loss of energy, the loss of like momentum and money because of those things there. What year are we at? Okay, so 2019. This was definitely the turning point for my life. And I've already shared this in one of my previous concepts, so I won't go into too much detail here. And if you do want to know more, just go and listen to one of my the previous episode where I talk about Bobby Ray. But 2019 was basically life and death for me. And so what a lot of people didn't know before getting out there during the summer, during the summer months, was essentially how hard of a pregnancy that I had, how much at risk that I was because of my son. And so I wasn't supposed to live according to doctors. And I took that as fuel to be able to get out there on the doors and to be able to just truly be grateful for every single day. But to have a year where you essentially are supposed to not be alive and then go out and break records, that's what people saw. But what they didn't see was the day in, day out of doctor's appointments and visits and struggles and emotional strain that it took essentially for me to be able to even give birth to my son during that time. So 2020, well, we all know 2020. This is definitely the COVID year, and so many people used COVID as an excuse for why their numbers weren't high or why they essentially weren't going to be knocking doors. But for me, 2020, this is going to be so fun. For those of you guys who are going to be watching this on YouTube, like, yeah, so 2020, during this time, I was only supposed to just go and knock 8 weeks. And I know so many of you are going to be like, yeah, you always say you're only going to be knocking 8 weeks, and then something happens and I end up knocking a full summer. But I really, truly was only supposed to work 8 weeks during the summer. And because we felt so grateful, I just felt super blessed. And what we ended up doing was like, okay, telling my tenants that they didn't have to pay for their rent during COVID, because I felt like we were doing fine. And so I go and do that with my tenants. COVID starts, and then I'm being told, I go and knock, and then was told that, hey, you probably can't knock anymore. And then my husband getting a call back from his company telling him, hey, we're probably not going to need you back until November or October, December. And so to not only be dealing with COVID and then also having to telling my tenants that they don't have to pay rent, and then hubby losing his job, I was like, well, not essentially losing his job, but essentially like, hey, we don't want you coming into work right now. I was like all kinds of freaking out. And I didn't have a number goal in mind. It was just essentially, I'm going to put my head down and I'm just going to work. I am going to just make sure, like, we were definitely cash poor in 2020, like having our money in investments, having our money in all these other places, because we just didn't feel like, you know, who plans for a pandemic? I know I'm definitely going to be planning for one now. And so what everyone saw in 2020 was at the end of the summer that, yes, I was the number one rep in the company, and, you know, serviced 1,012 accounts. But what they didn't see was all the struggles that it did take there. And currently in 2021, as I, continue to coach and teach like one-on-one with girls in different industries, I felt the need to go and do blitzes and go and figure out like what it takes in other industries to be able to learn and understand better how to teach girls how to sell, how to be able to teach females how to mentally overcome the struggles that we get during the doors. And so 2021, what people are seeing right now is, holy cow, Suli is slaying it in solar. Suli is doing amazing in solar, but what they don't see are the lawsuit threats that I'm getting as I'm finding success. What they don't see are the lawsuit threats that I'm getting from friends who I thought were friends as I'm finding success here on the doors. What people aren't seeing are all the relationships that I had to let go and leave in the past for my mental stability and being able to just move on to where I'm at now. And so as I finish up this episode, I want all of you guys to just take the time in your guys' lives today and be able to just like look back, reach out to those people who you feel like are having success and ask them like, what are some of the struggles that they had gone through on the doors to be able to help them overcome? Like, what are some of the things that they've done off the doors to be able to give them the success that they need? Because at the end of the day, you and I, all we see are stats, all we see are people's numbers, all we see are people's success, but what we're not seeing are people's like hard work, are people's failures, are people's emotional struggles. And I'm here to say that for the last 13 summers, I've never been more on an emotional roller coaster, but truly grateful for where I'm at. Thanks again for tuning in. And if I've added any value to any of you ladies today, go ahead and share this episode with another female knocker and tag me. Thanks for taking the time to tune in. If I've added any kind of value to your thoughts on knocking doors, please share this podcast with another female rep. Until next time, know that you are capable, you are valued, and most importantly, you are enough.